Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As you would recall, His Excellency the President had a meeting with all the stakeholders. We also had a meeting with the petroleum sector. And so when we received the invitation, we thought that it was work in progress and that we're all working to ensure that we are on the same wavelength and to address the many challenges confronting this nation, particularly in the energy sector, because the challenges are enormous and the challenges appear to be compounding. Indeed, just when I was coming today, I saw a letter from Sinon Asogli on the curtailment of the supply of power of almost 600 megawatts because government has failed and the power sector has failed to pay liabilities and debt that keeps mounting. And as we speak, that's about $300 million. And so the situation keeps exacerbating, the situation keeps worsening, and it gets bad and bad by the day. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may be aware, we normally have the petroleum sector and the power sector. And so I'll do some brief remarks on the petroleum sector, on the power sector, and do more with the petroleum sector. So, like I said, we have the power sector and the petroleum sector. And in the petroleum sector, you have upstream and downstream. In the power sector, you normally have to generate, transmit, and distribute that power. In the power sector, you could also have renewable and non-renewable, conventional and non-conventional, and all kinds of descriptions depending on how you look at it. There's always been the argument that once you have enough installed capacity, it means that your problem is solved. And we just thought that we should give you some background. In 2007, when we had the load shedding, our installed capacity was almost 2,000. The peak demand was about 1,300. And so we had more than 700 megawatts of redundancy if you had to do only with installed capacity. But because of our generation mix, if the hydrology is not good or you have some fuel challenges, you could still have load shedding. Fast forward in 2013, 2014, you still had very good redundancy, but then we lost about 800 megawatts from the hydro dam because the dam was dried up. And so that called for diversification so that we can manage the system. And our policy proposals from 2009 was to develop a robust, resilient, and efficient power sector and also transition, and that is where the petroleum sector comes in, from light crude oil into a gas to power era. Particularly when we discovered oil in 2017, our main objective was to maximize not just the oil find, but the entire value chain by developing our gas infrastructure and also dealing with the financial health of both the power sector and the petroleum sector whilst promoting local content and local participation. And so, as you may be aware, we brought on board so many generation plants that were diversified. KTPP, TICO, Combined Cycle, Car Power, Ameri, AXA, and most of them were dual fuel. They could use gas, some could use light crude oil, some could use distillate fuel, in order to give you that flexibility within the sector, such that when you have a problem with one sector, you can also deal with the other sector. But you cannot deal with generation if you don't also address the transmission mechanism. And all that you see, the bulk supply points and the 330 kVA lines and all that you see enabled us to transport power from Ghana to our neighboring countries such as Burkina, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin. And now, looking at the current West African power pool, 14 countries are interconnected, either with the 275 kVA or 330 kVA. And so Ghana is in a position now to export power all the way to Nigeria. Then finally is the distribution sector. And like I said, Sinon Asogli has just suspended supply of more than 500 megawatts of power because of the distribution sector. When the power is supplied and you do not recover the amounts at the distribution level, the entire value chain is affected. And so we sought to reduce the losses from 22% to 8% using the 500 million Millennium Challenge Corporation money to particularly invest in ECG, boost the bulk supply points, have more meters, introduce smart meters, and also we introduced the energy sector levies, which is today generated over 40 billion to this government to address the legacy debt whilst we seek to reduce the losses. Unfortunately, because of the political interference that we witnessed, the PDA scandal rocked the nation, and the U.S. government had to withdraw $190 million in respect of the compact. And because of some of this political and unnecessary interference, today the losses is gone to about 32%, what we call the ATCC, aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. And so today, we have an installed capacity of 5,454 megawatts, a dependable capacity of 4,843, and a peak demand of 3,000. So you have more than 1,500 megawatts of redundant power. And yet, there's load shedding. Even today, our exports, we are shedding a lot, especially to CEV. So clearly, the power sector is not being managed well. This should have been the way the cash waterfall mechanism works. The generation sector takes 66%, transmission 10%, and the distribution sector 22%. And that is what will flow into the petroleum sector, so that the gas that is supplied from upstream and processed for consumption, then the petroleum sector can also function effectively. But you and I can recall that PURC has consistently complained that, one, the money is inadequate. Two, ECG has not adhered to the cash waterfall mechanism. Three, there's unnecessary political interference, particularly with the procurement of light crude oil. And this government having slept on the job, today the gas that they touted as being so much, the gas is no more inadequate. And now they procure light crude oil of about $40 million every month. So this year alone, we estimate that they will procure $480 million worth of light crude oil. That amount could have established another gas processing plant. But since assuming office, with Ghana Gas, despite handing over the gas infrastructure and the gas processing plant, this government has not added even 1 kilometer of gas pipeline. Neither have they added anything significant to what they inherited from the NDC in respect of the upstream and downstream petroleum sector. There are so many reasons why we are seeing all these challenges. And on a daily basis since January, there have been some interruptions, and sometimes they shed about 500 megawatts of power. This is basically due to gas shortfall, which has crippled the sector, and also, like I said, non-adherence to the cash waterfall mechanism. And a lot of contractual obligations that this government is not adhering to. If you look at the judgments that we've incurred, a lot of them were avoidable, a lot of them were unnecessary, but because of the unnecessary political interference, we've had to deal with a lot of judgment debt currently affecting us. In the petroleum sector, the NDC is very proud of our track record. Through consistent and pragmatic measures that we put in place, we delivered 3 FPSOs. We brought on board the Jubilee field, we brought on board the 10 field, and we brought on board the OCT fields. In addition to that, like I said, we constructed the Atuabo gas processing plant at a cost of about $1 billion. And that gas infrastructure has been a game changer. Indeed, in 2022, because of crude oil and gas import substitution, this country saved over $1 billion. If we did not have the gas infrastructure, it would have spent more than $1 billion importing light crude oil. And then, as you may be aware, the OCTP field has an integrated gas processing plant. People always think that it's just the Atuabo gas processing plant. In fact, the OCTP field alone contributes about 60% of our gas infrastructure. We passed the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. We passed the Petroleum Exploration and Production Law. We also passed the local content legislation to allow you, local entrepreneurs, to have a very, very effective way of participating in the petroleum sector. We also made significant investments in the thermal oil refinery, deregulated the petroleum sector so that we do not keep accumulating the debt that we accumulated, particularly from forex issues. And, like I said, the energy sector levy, we did not just pass the energy sector levy, we handed over an amount of $234 million sitting in the account at the time we were leaving office. So these three pictures that you see are the FPSOs. The FPSOs are huge ships where the oil is extracted and pumped to the shore. And indeed, as for the OCTP, not only do we pump oil, we also process gas in situ and deliver lean gas for the thermal industries. And this is a picture of the Atuabo gas processing plant that we bequeathed to the Akufo-Addo administration from the hard work of the NDC government. And this is also the thermal oil refinery. Unfortunately, for about 4 years now, the thermal oil refinery has not been working. Government took an initial decision to turn it into a tank farm, and recently they attempted to sell it off. And we have stated clearly that we would not support the selling of the thermal oil refinery. We rather believe that we can get a private sector in a JV so that we can revamp this oil refinery to deliver about 45,000 barrels of crude oil processing on a daily basis. And so, because of our intervention in the gas sector, as you can see, from 2014, we had only 55. Now we are doing 255,000 MMscf. And that should tell you that the gas infrastructure is a game changer. Indeed, in the oil sector, as you can see, total receipts of about 9.8 billion from 2011 to 2023. And out of this, about 75% of that accrued to the Akufo-Addo-led administration. And so if you take our 8 years, and they are 8 years, as you can see the figures, from 2017 to 2023, the oil revenues that accrued to the Akufo-Addo government is more than double what accrued to President Mahama and President Akufo-Addo. And like I said, the energy sector levies, we got only 3 billion. They are receiving 45 billion. Petroleum revenues, we got just about 3 billion. They are receiving 7.4 billion. Eurobond, we got just about 3 billion. They've received 11 billion. Bank of Ghana financing was zero in 2016. In 2022, 54 billion. And as we speak, Bank of Ghana alone is financed this government by about 70 billion. Stabilization levy, 200 million accrued to them. But the current situation is very worrying, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why the NDC believes that we ought to have a change and to reset this government. The oil refinery is on its knees. You and I know that oil production has declined by more than 30%. And Ghana's oil sector is collapsing. Most of the major oil companies are leaving Ghana. And Adako has left Ghana. ExxonMobil has left Ghana. ENI is in court. And ENI is investing more in La Côte d'Ivoire than in Ghana. And they are making huge discoveries. Indeed, even access to electricity, we moved it from 50 to about 84%. This government is moving from just about 84% to 86%. So whilst we did about 30 percentage point increase in 8 years, they are doing just about 4% thereabout. And that should tell you that, look, this sector is simply not doing well. Unstable power supply, export to all our neighboring countries have been reduced and curtailed drastically, and we are losing the necessary forex exchange. The ECG's losses alone in 2022 was more than 10 billion cedis. Last year, their losses more than 6 billion cedis. So in 2 years, the ECG's loss is about 16 billion cedis. In 2016, when we were leaving office, ECG made a profit of more than 300 million cedis. And that is the state of the energy sector. This chart tells you the projection, the red line. We should have been increasing our oil production year by year up to here. But today, this is where we are. And look at the gap. When Ken Ofori-Atta went to borrow money from the Eurobond, he promised them that he will move daily production from 190,000 to 400,000 barrels a day. It has since declined to about 130-something thousand barrels. And so this is the true state of the petroleum sector when it comes to the upstream. And normally in the petroleum sector, what you do is that after you've discovered oil, you do an appraisal, first oil, very minimum, and you start building up. And when you build up and you reach this peak, you want it to plateau for a very long time before you start declining and then you decommission. But we just went up and immediately we are coming down. And that is very worrying because in the petroleum sector, one bad news follows another bad news. And so when Exxon leaves, when Anadaku leaves, when ENI is in court, nobody would want to invest in Ghana. And when we attend international conferences, people are asking critical questions about Ghana, and it's really, 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 really terrible. If we had gas, we wouldn't have imported 1.1 billion worth of HFO. So clearly, we're having a major, major problem. And the sector has been bedeviled with so much scandals under this government. A few of them is a Mary scandal, which had to lead to the dismissal of a whole cabinet minister. PDA scandal, the GPGC judgment debt, ENI judgment debt, Sahara's judgment debt. And when you put all these judgment debts together, the amount from these judgment debts could have put in place a second gas processing plant. And so these are some of the issues that we would have to deal with when we assume office. And on assumption of office, we cannot claim to know all. We want to work with you, particularly CBOD. One of the areas we will look at is a goal for oil program. We find it bureaucratic, and we think that it needs to be reformed. We cannot continue the way this government is going about with the goal for oil. There are huge losses accruing to Bank of Ghana. And now you members of CBOD, hitherto you could get about 50% of your forest requirement. Today you are unable to get even 15% of your forest requirement. Because that same forest that would have come to Bank of Ghana to be used to give you, for you to import your products, they've decided to hijack it up there and doing all kinds of funny things with Tor over there. So let me assure you, on assumption of office, we shall review this policy. We shall ensure that the forex is readily made available to you, and that this obnoxious policy would be a thing of the past. We would not continue the way it is. Last week, I heard the president say that the goal for oil was not for the stability of the city. I mean, that is what they've always told us. They've always told us that goal for oil is to stabilize. And I think Napor also said that. What did they tell us when we were doing goal for oil? They said it's supposed to arrest the fall of the city. The city has since been falling, and you have a whole vice presidential candidate who was once a minister of energy, exhibiting such level of incompetence when it comes to even information flow. So if they go for oil, it's not supposed to deal with forex. It's not supposed to deal with shortages. It's not supposed to deal with price increment. Then why go for oil? Because government policies are meant to address a particular challenge. Policies are not implemented out of the blue. And policies have certain key ingredients. So I find it very bizarre that they decide to get into this matter, and now they are virtually denying that. But I am confident, and I know that the NDC will win this election. I'm certain about that, because our track record is superior. The suffering, the mismanagement, the incompetence, and the corruption that has bedeviled this sector, there surely ought to be a reset. And we believe that Dr. Bawumia cannot hold his own members accountable. And so even for the sake of accountability, for the sake of prudence, and for the sake of good governance and good management, these guys have to pack bag and baggage so that they will be answerable for some of the very bizarre decisions they've taken in terms of policy and its implementation. We want to have a resilient, robust power sector. And that ought to form a linkage with the petroleum sector. We also left a very robust gas to power era where when we're living, we had enough gas. Today, we don't have enough gas. The gas is inadequate. And so we would ensure that we put in place the mechanism to bring on board the second gas processing plant. President Mahama has engaged all the sector players, and we are confident that there's enough raw gas to feed our second plant. And that is something we intend to do. Then we want to increase power to neighboring countries. And then we would utilize the energy sector levies for their intended purpose. Part of it is supposed to go into the petroleum sector. That is not being done. We would adhere to the tenets of the energy sector levy. We will not borrow those monies and use it for non-power or non-petroleum related activities. And then we would ensure that we adhere to the cash water flow mechanism. We intend to promote a 24-hour economy with adequate, reliable, and affordable power supply, as well as petroleum supply, to ensure that we have accelerated inclusive growth. And like we said, we would implement a time of use tariff to give the necessary incentives to industry and businesses to work around the clock. And when we say a 24-hour economy, we are not saying that 3 people will be competing for the same job. What we are saying is that they can run a shift. And so this idea by the running mate that even God sleeps in the night, and hence you cannot implement a 24-hour economy, he simply doesn't understand what he's talking about. In the UK, even in Ghana here, check with the meter manufacturing companies. They run in shift of 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. And so if it's happening in Ghana in a micro element or in a micro sector, why can't we replicate it so that we can bring on board more industries and factories? But that is anchored on the provision of reliable, cheap power, which is also anchored on the petroleum sector. And so we need to form that linkage to ensure that we deal with that situation. But we are also aware of the energy transition. And so clean energy consumption in line with our energy transition would be one. For instance, if you take the levies that we pay, one of them has to be used for premixed fuel. We want to split that fund into 2 and use one for outboard motors that uses rechargeable batteries. And with modern technology, now the rechargeable batteries can do 48 hours. And what artisanal fishermen do is that they go and come back the same day. So if you give them 2 batteries with solar panels, it means that they can even stay for more than 48 hours without having challenges. We also want to match our generation with consumption so that we don't incur so much debt. And also, like I said, hydro power, we would isolate it and use it for industry, but increase renewable energy up to 10% of the share of non-hydro power. We shall also transparently manage the energy sector levies. Government alone owes 1.8 billion since January, and they haven't paid that money. We would ensure that it is properly utilized and that all of you will benefit from that. Review the operations of the power utilities, significantly reduce the losses, and make budgetary provisions where MMDAs consume power so that we can address the challenges. Our Light Up Ghana would ensure that almost all the street lights that are not working today, the street light levy is used for that intended purpose, and restore Ghana as a leading and reliable power exporter in West Africa. We shall also promote the use of electric vehicles in a phase-out manner with you, so that you do not suffer from policy disruption and interventions. Rural electrification, we intend to achieve universal access by 2028. This government has said 2030, but our track record shows that we can achieve that. And we would prioritize procurement of locally manufactured goods to increase local content and participation, restore credibility in the sector, reduce the unnecessary corruption in the sector, and bring about transparency. We shall implement legislative provisions to improve incentives to attract investments in the upstream petroleum sector. And that is very, very key. We still need the big boys, but if you don't give them the incentives, you surely not have them. And that is an area that we really want to work on, as well as increase the acreage sizes and ensure that we optimize and use modern technology, especially in deep water, so that we can increase our petroleum resources. Also, the Voltairean Basin, we intend to accelerate the pace of exploration so that we can achieve our set targets. Gas utilization beyond power is something that we shall implement aggressively. What we believe is that apart from the power sector, the petrochemical sector, the agri sector, and particularly LPG, because of what we did with Atuabo gas, today we supply about 40% of domestic LPG. When we bring on board the second gas processing plant, we believe that we can eventually supply 100% LPG domestically with CBOD, so that we can cut down on the level of deforestation. Recently, we went on a campaign tour, and I tell you, the level at which the trees are being cut for charcoal is unimaginable. We launched the cylinder promotion program, which increased LPG consumption by about 6% annually. We are now seeing a decline, and we shall revisit that cylinder promotion program, which Honorable Boy in particular spearheaded. It's something that we intend to bring back and take away some of the taxes on domestic gas, if possible, so that we can increase the consumption of LPG. Like I said, we would construct an additional gas processing train, which is a second gas processing plant aside the Atuabo, and achieve 100% supply and utilization of LPG for indigenous processing. And then we will review the current cylinder recirculation model. We've had discussions with you. Some of you have expressed your misgivings. We believe that the two systems can run concurrently, so that eventually, if there's the need to phase out, the market itself will determine. But people have gone for loans, people have gone for huge commercial loans from the banks, invested in the downstream sector, and all of a sudden, you want to curtail their businesses, you're going to incur huge losses, and that can impact the economy. Normally, when you are implementing such policies, you do a pilot and do a gradual roll-up, you monitor the situation, and then the industry players themselves, when they see that the system is working, you don't even need to tell them. They will quickly adjust and follow suit. And that is exactly what we intend to do in partnership with you and in collaboration with you. Like we said, we would reposition TOR and ensure that TOR processes our domestic crude and give you the necessary LCs, so that instead of importing everything, you, the BDCs, can procure from TOR in collaboration with the OMCs, so we can supply the system. We believe that with our domestic refinery capacity, we can meet 100% our petroleum product consumption needs. If you take Central, you take TOR, and you take the other smaller refineries, we are confident that such as Plankton, Akwaba, we can meet our domestic demand. And it's something that we intend to work with you, not just to meet domestic demand, but Ghana can become the hub for the export of petroleum products to our neighboring countries. We would create the enabling environment to incentivize private sector participation in the oil and gas sector, but more importantly, we would insist on local content and local participation. You would be the first point of call in all the policies that we implement. And where we realize that you, the local businessman, cannot, we would create the enabling environment for you to form JVs with foreign parties so that they can bring the financing, the technical expertise, the know-how, and then eventually you can benefit from that sector. We also believe that we have to restructure BOST. BOST is becoming an octopus and an amorphous animal and virtually getting into every space. BOST's core mandate is to keep strategic reserves, build infrastructure in terms of tankage and pipeline, so that it will be a vehicle for you, the BDCs and the OMCs, to function effectively and not to outcompete you. You are a cardinal factor in the oil and gas sector. And I bet you, President Mahama has assured you that we will restructure BOST. We would conduct a forensic investigation of BOST's activities. Because the reports we are getting indicates that there's massive corruption, massive underhand dealings, financial malfeasance in BOST. And let me make it clear that we will retrieve every penny, every cedi that has been misappropriated as far as BOST is concerned. And we are determined to do so. But we can only do so with your mandate. And so if you're a Ghanaian and you want to see that level of accountability, it is incumbent upon you to put your political difference aside and vote for the NDC so that we can deal with that amorphous animal called BOST. Because where BOST is headed, I can tell you, we are going to incur serious debt in the foreseeable future. The premix fuel issue is major. I come from a fishing community. And I tell you, when the fuel gets to Bupe, which is not a fishing town, all the premix vanishes in Bupe. And that's a fact. And you are living witnesses. Under the NDC, that was not the situation. The premix committees were working effectively to the extent that they made savings and they were putting up schools. Today, political apparatchiks have hijacked the whole premix system. People who are not fishermen are in charge of premix. And what it does is that it eventually finds its way into your fuel tank. And so we shall review that, put in place a live monitoring mechanism with you. When the premix is landed, you know the quantities, you can track it. With modern day technology, we should be able to know exactly where the premix landed. But like I said, we also roll out a pilot system where we would use outboard motors that are chargeable, and then eventually we can go there. Because I recall that under Honorable Boa, we used to subsidize a lot of kerosene. And the kerosene found its way into people's tanks. But when we started the cylinder recirculation model and the LPG promotion model, we took out the subsidy on kerosene and used it for the cylinder promotion, and then brought kerosene at par with diesel and petrol. And the success story is measurable, is quantifiable, and you can see for yourself that this is a policy that is working. And so those MPP party apparatchiks who have hijacked the premix system, I think this is the time for them to begin to write their handing over notes, because it will be a thing of the past. And we would bring about transparency and ensure that we deal with that. This is a sample of the outboard electronic motor. You charge it, it takes about 48 hours, no noise, low carbon, it meets energy transition needs, and it's cheaper. Because unlike the traditional outboard motor where you have to service the motor and buy fuel every day, you can even use solar to charge this, and we believe that that is the way to go. But we also believe that fuel transportation ought to be reviewed. We've received several complaints from the OMCs and even from some of you on the padding of margins on the petroleum buildup. We'll review the price buildup and make it more transparent and cut out the fat so that when it comes to the petroleum price buildup, it can be transparent, it can be efficient, and we would ensure that we deal with the challenges associated with that. We also know that we have to construct an onshore pipeline from the west to the east so that it gives us reliability, security, and reduce the cost. The West African Gas Pipeline have just indicated that they want to increase the cost of transporting fuel. And sometimes in this sector, when it comes to supply reliability, you need a second pipeline so that it gives you that flexibility and reliability. We would initiate the development of an additional mooring facility to address the current demand challenges. We have taken note that your current mooring facility is not enough. Governments are supposed to make bold decisions and to address the challenges. And even if there are challenges, we would engage all the stakeholders and address this particular challenge so that we'll have an additional mooring facility to address the supply security. And one other thing we'll do is that the cash waterfall mechanism would allow you to be represented on the cash waterfall mechanism committee. It's not a committee that develops nuclear weapons. It's a committee that just ensures that money is collected in the sector is properly accounted for. Some of you are accountants, some of you are finance people, economists. We need you on that committee to increase the level of accountability and to ensure that we deal with the challenges. If the tanker drivers are also here, we would engage you. We do not believe that we should get directly into some of the activities, but I'm sure that with the right leadership, we can do that. We will review the NPA Act and bring it in line with current and modern tenets so that it can serve you better. In the petroleum sector, we have 4 main anchor pillars. That is 1, supply reliability. 2, to ensure that we deliver the products in a safe manner and ensure that they are delivered with the right quality and quantity. And finally, the 4th will be the issue of pricing. We want to ensure that the pricing reflects the true situation so that the consumer benefits from what we are doing. We would ensure fairness and equity in LACAN allocation. I get a lot of complaints. That's a fact. And you know, this sector, you can't cheat everybody all the time. The word kululu currently being manifested at NPA in terms of LACAN allocation will be a thing of the past because His Excellency President Mahama has indicated that you have a monthly meeting with you captains of industry. And so whoever here becomes minister or NPA boss or wherever, before you go for that monthly meeting, you should be aware that you're going to meet all these sector players before President Mahama. And it is your duty to do what is right and proper. Because unlike the current president, President Mahama would not be a clearing agent. If you miss the line and you cross the red line, you can't be sure that he will fire you. And so be rest assured that you have a president coming in who would do what is right and proper, but in collaboration with you, we want to restructure the reserve requirements that we need for this country. Because we believe that it's not just BOST that should keep the strategic reserves. We believe that with modern technology, we can work with you so that you keep a certain minimum quantum of petroleum products all the time. And if we can do that in a holistic manner, we will be serving that same strategic reserves. Strategic reserves simply means that you need a certain minimum amount of petroleum products in the country every time, so that in case of supply disruptions, you can have a buffer. In most countries, that's what they do. It's not just the state-owned entity. Yes, the state-owned entity has a role to play, but in partnership with you, we can agree on a framework that works for everybody so that we can keep the strategic reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you and to assure you that we are also aware of some regulatory overlaps, and we would, together with you, and consult you when it comes to the crafting of regulation, so that that regulation would work for all of us, so all of us can live in harmony, can live in peace, and ensure that this country grows and prosper. Let me thank the CBOD. Let me thank Dr. Patrick. But with your permission, let me thank the Honorable Boa, who was my minister, has provided a lot of leadership, even though I'm the chairman. Honorable Bawa, my colleague in Parliament, and all the members of the Energy Committee, without favoring anybody. All of them have worked tirelessly. And I can tell you that our energy manifesto is a product of consultation with you. We've had a series of consultation with you. But more importantly, when it comes to the policy implementation, we shall do that hand in hand with you. We look forward to the NDC assuming office come 7th January 2025. And I tell you, we will turn this around. We'll reset this country and put this country on a path of growth, on a path of prosperity, and more importantly, on a path of inclusive growth. Thank you very much. I'm grateful.